So let's look at a video that they put together using one of the patients who volunteered, and let's see what the patients have to say.
Parkinson's about 10 years.
Can you hear my audio? Share computer sound. Okay, now you should be able to.
The main symptom that really grabbed my attention was when my hand started shaking, and it was violent. I generated a spreadsheet of 43 different symptoms that I had. Like, I lost my sense of smell. Of course, my balance was terrible. I was unable to sleep at night. Most of the times I'd sleep 2 hours, that'd be it. And so then I went back to the doctors time and time again, and it took them 3 years to fully diagnose me. They said, you have Parkinson's and your whole life's gonna change. Really a hard thing to swallow was that, hey, I'm not going back to work anytime soon, maybe never, because I was a full-time engineer, plus I ran a company. I used to work 12 to 14-hour days, 6 days a week. I was not able to sculpt any longer. And so that was a real tough thing for me because I'd been sculpting for 15 years to get to that point. Like, wow, I really got it. And then it's gone.
All right.
And I've had Parkinson's about 10 years.
So Parkinson's disease is pretty common, and you probably have that feeling too, with seeing people around you and close by having Parkinson's disease. It's about 1 million people in the United States and about 10 million people worldwide. So there's 60,000 people getting Parkinson's disease every year. And as you probably know, the main problem is the loss of dopamine in the brain because of the brain cells who are supposed to be making it are dying, and we're losing those cells. And there are many symptoms with Parkinson's that include movement problems like the tremor, shaking or stiffness, rigidity, slowness, but also non-movement problems like constipation, sleep problems, smell problem, mood, depression, and even later on memory problems in some people. And we could actually now do scans to look at the brain's dopamine level. So this picture here on the left, which has a longer kind of a comet shape head with the tail, yellow color on both sides, is the dopamine. And it's kind of gone or reduced in the other side on the normal brain. And the medications that we use for Parkinson's are trying to increase that dopamine. So on this picture, these two spoons or spatulas are actually neurons or end of neurons, so these gray shapes. And one is releasing the dopamine, which is green, and the other is absorbing it, which is the purple cups or C shapes that are taking up that dopamine. And all these different colors of purple and bright blue and light blue and squares and circles are various ways where we enhance that dopamine in this connection. So all these medications that you use, some are longer acting, some are shorter acting. But bottom line is that they're all trying to increase the amount of dopamine in the leftover neurons. So there are a lot of these gray shapes that are gone. And there's nothing we can do about that so far. But the leftover are doing some dopamine, and we will try to boost them up. This is kind of a timeline on how the medications were discovered or developed. We started using the levodopa in 1960s. There's a good movie about it called Awakening, which is about Parkinson's in 60s. There was a special type of Parkinson's 60s that was coming from viral illnesses in the brain and has a complicated name, encephalitic lethargica or post-encephalitis Parkinson's. But it does behave very similar to regular Parkinson. And then, as you can see, we have been coming up with newer and newer medications every decade since then. And now it's almost every year we get 1 or 2 new medications for Parkinson's. Parkinson's medications don't work smoothly. So they work for a while and then the benefit goes away. And these are two different states that a person can be in, two extremes. One is the on state when the medicines are working the best, and one is the off state when the benefits are gone. And then there's a third stage where the medicines work too much, which we call dyskinesia. And it could become a problem where patient is going between these three states multiple times during the day. So let's look at them, how they look. So this is the on, where person is getting good benefit from medication. There is a little bit of tremor in the left hand, but he can run while holding his cell phone in his one hand, and he can lean down and look at the camera. And now the same guy, when the medication effects is gone, the same could be the same day, then he's having a lot more tremor in the right hand. He's now running much more slowly with much shorter steps. Although, fortunately, he can still walk and run, but is definitely not as smooth or good as before. But the off states can be even worse. Some people, when they turn off, they are completely off. They cannot move, they're frozen, they can hardly walk. And some people shake really bad when they're off. But then when medications are working, we not only get this good on state, we sometimes get a state where medication is working too much. So patient is moving too much, more than he wants to, uncontrollably, and it cannot sit still. And that's what we call dyskinesia. And that happens when the medications kick in, or at the peak. So that can be a problem when throughout the day you're going through these three states multiple times. So it all becomes like a roller coaster, right? You're on, two on, and then off, and then on again. So you have some good time in the day, but there's a lot of bad time. So this is that roller coaster ride that is showing up, and it's a single day from 7 a.m. on the left hand to 11 p.m. at bedtime. This guy is a late sleeper, and you can see how the medications just goes up and down. And it could become even worse. You can see a lot more waviness in the same day as compared to the before, and is having a lot more trouble throughout the day as compared to before. And there are ways that we ask them to track it, and they can mark it if they are in good state or bad state. That are called diaries, Parkinson diaries or motor diaries. And it's a very common way that we track how patients are doing when we're doing research to see how much fluctuation they're having throughout the day. So the goal is in Parkinson's treatment later on to try to maximize that on time so that there is no off time and there is no dyskinesia. And that's where the deep brain stimulation device comes in. This device does not slow down or stop or reverse Parkinson, but it can take away all that waviness, fluctuation throughout the day remarkably well, to increase that smooth on time throughout the day without going through other states. So DBS for Parkinson's disease, let's look at some examples. So truth is in the pudding. So this is someone who is off right now, young female, lot of tremors, right side worse than left, but also leg is shaking, the whole body is shaking from the tremor. And this is off stimulation. And next slide, we'll see her on. Here is another person off stimulation. And again, you're seeing a lot of tremor, pretty bad. He's actually controlling it from his iPod. And now you could actually do it with your own iPhone without needing an iPod. And then there's another guy. Again, these people have had DBS, but the stimulation is off right now. So they're not getting any current in the brain. And you can see their tremors and walking difficulty, and so on and so forth. Let's look at the next slide. And now the same people are with their stimulator on. So the first lady has almost no shaking. You could hardly see a slight shaking in the left leg, maybe left hand, when she was resting, but otherwise nothing. It's all gone. And then this person, as he turns on, and there's a green light turns on his device telling him it's on. And as it kicks in, you can see that the tremor just slowly goes away. And this third guy who was having trouble walking with his DBS on is now walking with large steps He's almost showing off with his big arm swing, doing really well with the stimulator. So why are we using DBS and how did we figure this out? This came in the idea of in 30s to 60s that you could do a surgery in the brain and make Parkinson better. But before, the surgery was cutting the brain. So you put a wire in the brain and you'll burn it and the area. But then the problem was that we were getting side effects like speech problems. So somebody said, we figured out after putting the wire in where we need to burn by turning up the current just a little bit, and we can see the symptoms go away and patients doing better. And then once we know it, we ramp up the current all the way and we can burn the brain. And the idea was that why not we just keep that slight amount of current going without burning it up all the way. And that's where the device was, pacemaker kind of device was modified to use as a brain stimulator. And then in 1990s, late 90s, we had it approved by FDA for a lot of indication, and it became kind of a standard of care by experts. But for a long time, nearly 20 years, we had about the same technology without much modification, despite our recognition, realization that there are some things we would like to see different or better. And until there were new companies that jumped into the game, and they started giving competition. Competition is healthy. So monopoly was finally broken in 2015 and or so, and then new devices came out in the market which had newer features that we were hoping to see. So what does DBS do? DBS sits in the chest just like a pacemaker. It hooks up with a wire that runs under the skin, going up the neck, behind the ear, and on the skull, all the way to the top. And that's where the surgeons have made a hole which has a silicone plug to close it, with the wire going into the deep part of the brain where the Parkinson is coming from. And what DBS does is that it turns on and it's kind of give a slight amount of current to the brain that kind of stuns that area of Parkinson's, which reduces the problems, the side effects or symptoms of Parkinson. And what happens is that this is how the day is before DBS with all these fluctuation, and this is how the day becomes once the DBS is gradually programmed and right setting is found. That waviness become much less pronounced and the day is more smooth. So when should we consider DBS then? We typically consider it when we start seeing that waviness. So initially, when your Parkinson starts, you can have medications as least as less as you want, and you will not see a lot of waviness or fluctuation. But gradually over time, your need for more medication increases, and as you start taking more medication, you will see that the day becomes more and more wavy, going up and down with those ons and offs, and that's when we should consider for DBS. And if you just do nothing and keep waiting until the disease becomes really severe, then you have missed the opportunity. Even if you were to do DBS, it won't be safe, or it will not give the benefit that you should have gotten years before. What does DBS do? It kind of does the same thing. It kind of gets the benefit that you were getting by increasing the dopamine in the brain. It is not increasing the dopamine. It's just providing electrical stimulation, but the end result is the same. So what gets better? The things that get better with the carbidopa-levodopa or Parkinson medication gets better with DBS2. The tremor gets better, the rigidity, stiffness, the slowness of bradykinesia, the lack of movement, and even those extra movement that someone is getting does get better with the DBS. So a lot of motor symptoms, but you will see what's missing in this list is the non-motor symptoms. So constipation and sleep and smell and all those things do not respond to DBS. So DBS is done for the motor reasons. This is kind of the way we control the device. So these two silver boxes or small devices are what goes into the chest. They look very similar in shape and size to pacemaker. And you see wires up on the top that go into the brain, and on the bottom is the connector. And then this is kind of that new advanced plug, the new design that holds the wire in place so it does not slip. And then these two, iPad and iPhone, are the ways we control the setting in these devices so that you get the right amount of current and in the right direction so that you get benefits that you needed. DBS is a multi-step process. We need to first make sure that Parkinson's disease is the real diagnosis. We need to make sure that medications have been tried properly so that insurance will cover it. We need to make sure that the patient will not have any undue side effects from the surgery, and there is a good chance of getting benefits. Once all that evaluation is done, and that's where my role is in my comprehensive clinic, is to get to that part. Then you go to the surgeon who takes images or scans of your brain, puts it on a computer, uses kind of a machine or a frame to guide where the wire needs to go into the brain, and then pushes the wire into the brain in the surgery. And during the surgery, we kind of do testing, and that's again my role with the surgeon, is to be there with the patient and do the testing to make sure wire is in the right spot, and so that we can secure it with the device I showed earlier. And then run the extension down to the battery and leave the battery in the chest. Now, these surgeries are done separately. Putting the wire in is a separate surgery, and running the connector and hooking up with a battery in the chest is a separate surgery. For safety reasons, it's important to do it separately, although some centers do have same day, two surgeries they do in the same day. For example, Mayo Clinic, because a lot of people are flying into Mayo Clinic from other states, they have come up with a single day program where they do both surgeries together in the same day, morning and afternoon. Programming. So this word, what does programming mean? Programming means that not just any current in the brain will work. The brain has, if you stimulate the brain, you can get good results and bad results. Brain is very sensitive, right? Everything is in the brain. So you want the good results and you don't want the bad results. And figuring out how much current needs to be given, where, and how it needs to be directed, where it needs to go so that it only gives the good results and not the bad results, is programming. And that programming is a process. We have kind of some guidance or rules to guide us on how to do it, but it still takes many steps to eventually get to a point where we say, okay, this is the right, good stimulation for your brain. And that's what is called programming. Abbott is one of the companies that came up with the new modifications to the old design or old device. I mentioned a couple of them. I showed you that they have kind of an iPhone or iPad kind of programmer apps that you can connect with, and the physician can connect with their iPad to the device. And it really makes it very easy to program as compared to before. The menus are much more visual and much more easy to do, and there are a lot more options than there used to be before. They also are trying to make each step of the surgery better. So they have a better way to secure the wire. They have wires which have segments at the end, so you have more options to control the current and guide it. The wires are better. They have more tolerance. They don't break easily, and those kind of things. So they have actually improved every single step of the process. Some you won't see because those are more related to how the surgery is done by the surgeons or the physicians. So this is how the wire sits in the brain. This tiny green area is what we need to control, and the red thing is a current. And one thing that Abbott device and Boston device has, the wires are broken into segments so that you can actually move the current around and give some, move it away from one area and move it closer to the other area, something we call directionality or direction. So right in used to be old days that the current will just spread all over once you turn it on, because it was just one ring that was giving the current out. And you can kind of see those contacts or rings here, jumpy mouse. And now that ring is broken into segments, and each segment can be stimulated separately so that you only get more current to one side of the wire than the other side. And we have shown that it actually is better in many ways to only stimulate one side of the wire rather than stimulating the whole wire, so that you move more away from the bad areas and you move more towards the good areas, and you get more benefit that way and better tolerance. They also, again, these are the iPad devices. You can see that the wire is kind of in the center here. This is the device the physician uses. You can see the ring is broken into segments. You can see how we can visually see what we're doing so that it's so easy to program. as compared to before. So this is kind of the modern era of programming, making it very easy for the physicians to do their job well. And then this is the patient side of things, where you also have with your own iPhone or iPod a control on the device where you want to turn it on, turn it off, check your settings, move the settings if your physician have given you that option, and things like that. So as I mentioned earlier, there are some symptoms that do not respond to DBS, and it's worth remembering because that's the part of evaluation. If DBS would work for everyone, we would not need an evaluation, right? We'll just have everyone just go to the surgery. We know it doesn't work for everyone, and that's why we need an evaluation. And we're basically looking for things that don't respond to DBS, like speech problems or swallowing problems, small handwriting, balance problems, falls, and things like that, and memory problems. Those things do not respond to DBS. DBS it's a procedure. So there are two problems with it, right? One is the surgical side, where you are putting wire into the brain. If you irritate the brain too much, it can have a seizure, you can have an infection there, it can bleed, you can have a small stroke. All those risks are there. Those risks are very small, and that's why we still do the surgery, and we do a lot of it. But those real risks are not zero. So it's important to know what those are, and accept those risks when going into the surgery. And that's what one of the role of your doctors is. And the other thing to know is that when you stimulate the brain, there are good areas and bad areas. So if you stimulate a bad area, you can get side effects, but those side effects only depend on the stimulation. So one of the programming goal is to move the current away from the bad area and more towards the good area, so you don't have side effects from the stimulation. So let's hear from someone that we started in the beginning with, who was telling us how bad his Parkinson's is, and he's not able to sculpt anymore. And let's see how his life is now with the stimulation going.
And I wished I had done it earlier. I really do. I could sculpt again. I could do my digital painting, all kinds of writing. I couldn't do any of those things before. I still have Parkinson's, but nobody knows it. That in itself is a huge thing, to be able to interact as a normal person. Just be normal. That's all I want. That's not a lot to ask. The game changer really was being able to get back to sculpting and to have that fine motor control that I never had in the past. For 10 years now, I've been waiting for it. And I used to say to myself, if I could just have one day, just give me one day. And now I've got every day. It's amazing.
All right, so once you get DBS, you will be able to sculpt, only if you have been able to sculpt before. So what are the steps to consider? As I said, it all starts with an evaluation and assessment, and that's where your physician can help to send you to a neurologist, or a movement disorder neurologist are usually the one which do the consultation for DBS, to do all that kind of evaluation necessary for someone to be considered for deep brain stimulation or DBS. I think that's all I had, and we can stop here and chat more about it.
Thanks, Dr. Bhatti. Did anybody have any questions? I think we have a small enough group where I can unmute everybody and see if anybody has any questions. See if I can. Oh, I muted you on accident. So if you put your own mute on, you'll still be muted and you'll have to do that yourself. There you go. Perfect. And I just wanted to say too, I know that we had a couple of people going in and out and on and off, probably some connection problems. The presentation is recorded and it will be on our website for anybody that was wondering about that. Did anybody have any questions for Dr. Bhatti?
What did you just say on here?
Yeah, but I wanted the video too.
Well, and ask the question you want to ask.
Hi, Mani.
Hi, Mani.
Hi, how are you doing, Dr. Bhatti?
Good, good. Good to see you.
Is there a big difference? I guess you're just showing us Abbott. Is there a big difference in that and Medtronic?
Depends on how you define big. There are definitely some differences. So the most important difference is that the wires that are put in the brain for Medtronic, they still are using the regular wires, which are whole. So when you turn it on, the current goes all around the wire, while the wires being used by Abbott are segmented. And so when you can turn on one side of the wire, so the current stays more on that side and less on the other side. There has been some studies to look at this question on how often we need to use the segments like that. And my impression is that in about a third of the patients, there is benefits of using a side or segment of the wire. So not in everyone, but a third is something like 30%, which is a pretty decent number. And the reason to use a side or a segment of the wire will be either that they are getting side effects if you use the whole wire. So the side effects go away if you just move to the one side of the wire. The other reason is battery, that if you're using just a part of the wire, a segment, you use less battery. And if you're using the whole wire, you use more battery. So the battery will last another 6, 12 months, maybe 18 months in some patients if you just use a segment and not the whole wire. So for those two reasons, about a third of the patient end up being on a segment and not the whole ring. That's the biggest difference. But there are some small differences that I think are undervalued. For example, the ease of programming is a big deal for me. The way the Abbott system works in terms of setting up, making notes, understanding what you're doing, that's something is much easier to learn and get better at as compared to the methods that Medtronic had before. The old system of Medtronic, they just announced a new system a week ago, but the old system of Medtronic, you had to have a very close distance with the patient. So patient couldn't get up and walk around as you're doing the programming. While with the Abbott, because they use Bluetooth, you can be 30 feet away from the patient and still have a connection. And that allowed me to do programming on some of the patients while having them walk. So they said their main problem is walking. And in the old days with Medtronic, they will sit down, you will do some changes, then they disconnect and they get up and they walk, and then they come back and they sit down and you do those changes. But now with Abbott, when I did some patients, they were just walking back and forth in the hallway and I was changing the setting. And I could see immediately what happens to the walking. These things mean a lot in terms of ease and efficiency and benefits. And there are many other small things like that. Patient controller is much better. And now they have an app that was approved by FDA, I think recently, that patient can download and have their own phone now control the app. So they don't need a separate controller and connect with it. And the way they connect, the interface, the app that they use is far more convenient and makes sense to patient as compared to the old devices we had with buttons and it was confusing. There wasn't a check mark and it was this button and that button that you have to press. And even walking someone on the phone through doing like a battery check was much harder. So those are small improvements, but I think beneficial and significant. And the biggest difference is on the segments of the wire that Medtronic still does not have.
Thank you.
Dr. Bhatti?
Yeah.
Does the patient resume taking medication after DBS, or is it less?
Yeah, that's a very good question. The DBS, by providing benefit directly, reduces the need for medications. But because it's not working for every symptom, patients still need medications for other symptoms. So Parkinson medication like carbidopa, levodopa works for sleep, for energy, for fatigue, for mood, all of those things that you do not see benefit with DBS alone. So that's why patients still stay on medication, but they cut down quite a bit. You know, in some studies, they cut down by half, 50%, but that's an average. So I've had one patient, that's my best patient, who was taking one pill a week after taking DBS. So one carbidopa levodopa pill a week. And initially for the first year and a half. And even now, I think he only takes like 2 pills a day or something. And that's how much benefit DBS can provide directly.
Thank you.
There you
Hi, I've just been early diagnosed with Parkinson's in January, and physically I can move well, but it's the dips up and down with the medication that bothers me. So when do you know to look into DBS?
Yeah, so I think we should start learning about DBS from day one, so that we know what it is, what it can do, what it cannot do. Even learning it is a long process. It takes about a year to get comfortable with what is DBS, what is going to do, how would my life will change if I have something like this. And technically, and even if the process of evaluation continues very fast, it takes about 3 to 6 months to get the device. So it's not an overnight thing. However, I think the exact question that you are asking is that what's the earliest a patient can get DBS?
Yes.
FDA allows DBS to be done after 4 years of disease, minimum 4 years. Typically, patients are getting the DBS around 7 years after the disease. That's kind of the current average. It used to be that they were getting the device 10 to 14 years after the disease, initially when the studies were done. They were really late patient. But over the years, we've learned that if you do it a little sooner, then it's better. So now it's between 7 to 10 years where we are typically doing DBS devices for patients. However, there is currently a research project going on in US, in Vanderbilt University, where they're looking at benefits of slowing down the disease with DBS. This has not been proven. It's experimental, but they have seen that if you do DBS very early, and they did the DBS in their patient 2 years after the disease, or less than 2 years, maximum was 2 years. So some were getting it a year after the disease. And those patients, they have followed for 5 years, and they're showing that their Parkinson's did not progress as much as someone who did not have DBS. And I just had a conversation this morning with the lead of this project. They did it just in Vanderbilt University, but now they have asked permission from FDA to do it with multiple universities to prove it and get another label or allowance, because FDA currently does not allow doing it before 4 years. And what they're proposing is doing it 2 years. So that's much sooner than 4 years. To change that for FDA, they're designing a study with 20 universities where they will be doing it at 2 years after the disease, and to show that there is benefit of slowing down Parkinson. But now what we're looking for is very different. Currently, the DBS is done to get rid of those on and off, the fluctuations. At 2 years of the disease, you have no fluctuation. Your disease is going really well. So you don't need it for fluctuation. So at 2 years of the disease, you're mainly doing it to slow down the disease. And for that, they have to really show it that it's worth taking the risk of letting someone drill a hole in your skull or two and push the wires in. It has to be worthwhile for doing something like that. But currently, at least 4 years, but most patients are doing it around 7.
Okay.
Are they considering that at the time of diagnosis or the time of symptoms? Because sometimes, it takes
Clock
2 or 3
starts from
years.
symptom onset, yeah.
Okay.
Clock starts from symptom onset. So even if someone waited for 7 years and just got diagnosis, they still can go on and get DBS.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
questions? Any last questions? No, it's always nice to have a second to talk to a doctor.
Amber, I have one.
Okay, Money.
Dr. Bhatti, how long does DBS last?
Yeah. So the benefits that you get initially from DBS, they have looked at them, what happens to them up until 10 years after having the surgery. And we don't have data after 10 years. For the first 5 years, there is almost no loss of benefit. You do need to ramp up the stimulation. So you started with a low current and you gradually increase it over time, every 6 months or so. But up until 5 years, the amount of benefit was almost the same as you got right after the surgery. After 5 years, it started going down. And then at 10 years, it's about 20% less than what you got initially, 20 to 30% less. After 10 years, we don't know. And it might be that the benefit will come down even more after 10 years. However, we are talking about benefits on the symptoms where it actually works, which is the tremor and the stiffness and slowness. There are many other symptoms where it doesn't work. So it is possible that a year or two after the DBS surgery, you can develop a new symptom that does not respond to DBS. So someone was doing fine, they were having good results, but on and off, they get a DBS, they're great. And then 2 years later, they develop balance problem and they start falling. And that's where DBS is doing nothing. So it could be that 5 years after the DBS, the patient is not doing well, and despite having a DBS, because they have problems that don't respond to DBS. But the problems that do respond to DBS, you keep seeing benefit all the way to 10 years.
Okay, well, I've seen benefit up to 20.
Oh,
So-
good. That's wonderful.
Great. Any last questions? I know sometimes it can be tricky to figure out how to unvolue or unmute and unvideo yourself. Okay. Well, before we go, I just want to remind well, first of all, thank you, Dr. Bhatti, for joining us again. I know that we had this presentation in April and a lot of people missed out. And so we're really glad that you're able to come back and join us. It's an important topic, and it's always nice to be able to give people as much education on treatment options that we can. So thank you. And thanks to you too, Rich, for setting this up. Couldn't have done that without you guys. So thank you over at Abbott for helping us get it set up. I also real quickly just wanted to let everybody know, if you haven't already heard, about our Walk the State Challenge and fundraiser coming up this fall. Normally we host it at Elmwood Park in person and have a really fun celebration, but with everything going on with COVID, obviously, we're actually really excited to be going virtual because we're also able to go statewide. And August 31st to September 12th is the Walk the State Challenge. We currently have 8 teams already registered who are committed to walking, running, cycling, exercising for 455 miles as a team, which is the distance from Omaha to Scottsbluff. So it's the distance across Nebraska. So we're really excited about that. If you're interested in forming a team, you can also help by donating to your favorite team, sharing our campaign page. That's coming up in just about 3 weeks, which is crazy how fast time flies. And then also after the challenge on Sunday, the 13th of September, we're having a virtual event where we'll have a speaker, some movement classes, and some voicing demo classes that we'll be doing for you guys for the virtual event, as well as celebrating everybody that took part in the challenge. So there's a lot more information on our website at parkinsonsnebraska.org, right on the home page. I would love for you guys to check that out. And if you had any questions at all, feel free to give me. The best way to get a hold of me right now is honestly through email, because we're not at the office very often. So shoot me an email if you had any questions. Otherwise, that's all I have for you, except for a very big thank you for joining us today. Do you have anything, Rich?
Thank you for hosting this.
Yeah, No,
Oh.
you're welcome.
Oh, you're very welcome. And thank you again, Dr. Bhatti. It was excellent. Monty, good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you too, Rich.
Okay.
Well,
Thanks,
you guys,
Dr. Bhatti.
yeah, thank you all. And again, just a reminder, this will be available on our website. So if you did not have a great connection, or if somebody you think might be able to benefit, please share with them. And I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your Saturday and weekend.
Amber, can you also send the link of recording to Julie? Maybe she can post it on Facebook group too.
Yeah, absolutely. Great
All
idea.
right. Thanks. Bye, guys.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks again. Bye.